Welcome to the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. And I'm your host, Sean Behrens. Visit thegermanyexperience.de for all kinds of information about this show. Now, due to various reasons, I'm taking a bit of a break for a few weeks. And in that time, I'm putting out some episodes from 2019. The interview you'll hear in this episode originally came out on July 2nd, 2019 and was episode 6. I had done some work previously with an American named Lori, who was eloquent, insightful, and damn funny. And I knew when I started this podcast that she was absolutely one of the guests that I had to have on. She agreed, and this was the result. She has a lot of wisdom about learning languages, raising bilingual children, and about the English and German languages. Here's Lori from the USA. So this week's guest is someone named Lori Charles-Kerner. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are.
Oh, very good. And you've been in Germany for quite some time now, right?
Yes, I have. Yep, yes. 39 years almost.
39 years. So you're not even an expat anymore, or do you?
Not really.
Do you still think of yourself as an expat?
No. I never really thought of myself as an expat.
Oh, why is that?
When I came over, I moved into my husband's family and his group of friends. So
right.
I didn't have the problem getting contacts that a lot of expats have.
Right. Okay. So, and you already knew German at that point?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I studied it in high school and at university.
Oh, okay. So, why German then? Have you always been bilingual, or why did you decide to study German?
One of the first reasons I decided to study German is because my father wanted me to take Latin.
Okay.
And when you're 16 years old, if dad says Latin, you take German.
Whatever else.
It's the other one. And there was also a World War II series on television called Combat. Mm-hmm. And the Germans there spoke German.
Okay.
It was the first time I'd ever really heard a foreign language, and I was fascinated by it.
Okay.
And I decided that's why I wanted to learn German.
Oh, very interesting. Mm-hmm. So then it was kind of a natural decision to end up in Germany.
Yeah, I guess. I studied 2 years in Salzburg. For some reason, they sent us to Salzburg to learn German.
Okay.
My husband
Why
said,
would that be?
I don't know, because I didn't understand anything when I got there.
Yes, that's another kind of German altogether.
Yeah, totally. But, I met my husband when he was at my university in the United States, so I came over here because of him.
Okay. I see. And then, and that was 39 years ago, as you said.
Yep. Okay. Summer it'll be 39 years.
Wow. So thanks for having me. We're in your living room here in Nuremberg. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten so accustomed living in Germany for so long that when you go into someone's house, the first thing that you do is take your shoes off, and sometimes you have Hausschuhe. But you said, no, you can leave your shoes on, and I'm from America. So it's like that there?
Yeah, we don't take our shoes off. Yeah. No, we don't take our shoes off when we come in the house.
Yeah.
In fact, in a lot of apartments and houses, when they're small, when you come in, you're immediately in the living room.
Right.
There's not a foyer or an entry or anything.
Yeah, it's the same in South Africa. I grew up wearing shoes in the house, basically, because you go out, you're visiting friends, and then you come home in the evening, and you just walk right in the door. And and in fact, we also came in through our lounge area. There was no garderobe, or if you want to put it like that.
Yeah, I find it very strange when I go to someone's house and they ask me to take my shoes off.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Even after all these years?
Yeah, because you wear shoes because they're part of your outfit, and you don't, I don't know. I just find it kind of strange, these people that have bags of house shoes next to the door that you're supposed to put on.
And I don't even know who else has been wearing these house shoes.
Yeah, that's another point.
What other feet have these shoes been on? Not comfortable with that.
Yeah, we had neighbors where you could always tell that they had visitors because all of the visitors' shoes were outside the door on the landing. So you could count how many guests they had.
Yeah, I'm amazed that there's not more shoes stolen in Germany, to be fair. In Johannesburg, those shoes would be gone.
Yes.
So you said that you studied German. You moved over
in 1980.
In 1980. Mm-hmm. What did you do when you moved over? Were you, because you're a teacher now?
Well, I was a German teacher in the United States.
And are we talking high school teacher or
high school? I taught a little bit at university, but basically a high school German teacher. And when I came here, for some reason, the Germans didn't want to learn German from me.
Well, okay.
I didn't understand that, but so I bought myself an English grammar book and said, okay, I'll teach English.
Right.
And every day I've been glad that it's my native language and it's not the one that I have to learn as a foreign language.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a tough language. Although German's a pretty tough language as well to learn.
It is, but I think English has a lot of rules. Like it'll be a rule where someone said, why do you say it that way? And you say, because it feels right.
Yeah.
What kind of a grammar rule is that? You know?
I get a lot of these kinds of questions on a daily basis in the office as the resident language checker, language expert. And a lot of times they ask me, why do you say that? And why do you do it? And I have no idea. I just said, because you do have to. Don't ask me why.
I always tell my students I kind of wish I had a camera in my glasses so I could look at the quizzical faces that they make and with the screwed up eyes. And sometimes I'll tell them, if you keep looking at me like that, you're going to need Botox. And I had one guy who said to me, but that's not logical. And I just sort of blurted out, you want logic? Do math.
Languages is not the place
not
for
English.
logic.
English is not
English.
logical now.
And what I do like about German is that the thing that I noticed when I started learning, we started learning just before we moved to Germany, is that the way you spell it is how it sounds.
Yes.
And conversely as well, how the word sounds is how you spell it. So if you hear a word, I'm very good at German spelling because the letters basically mean. But in English, there's all these other ways of pronouncing the same kind of syllables or letter couplings like OU, rough, trough, and what's another?
Through and through.
Exactly.
Yeah. But if you say that if I say that to my German students, they'll say, no, German's really hard to spell. And it's like,
it's not
really.
It's not. It's a piece of cake, Germans. It's a piece of cake.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of just started teaching English because they didn't want to learn German from.
I bought a book. I read the grammar explanation and thought, what are they talking about? So I tried to figure it out.
Okay. And how did you get started teaching when you came over?
I started at the Volkshochschule.
Okay.
I hit the ground running. I was lucky because my husband had organized everything ahead of time for me. Okay. And after a semester, I started at the university in Nuremberg, teaching 2 or 3 classes. And then it just kind of grew from there.
So now you've been doing this for this many years. Are you still enjoying it?
I love it.
Yeah?
I love it.
What do you love about it?
I love teaching. Okay. You can ask my daughters, they'll tell you I will teach anyone, anything, anywhere. Makes them roll their eyes a lot, and they say, get a piece of paper and pencil, and I'll tell you about that.
Okay. Oh, God. Lori's going again.
Yes, Mom's
going again.
Yeah. No, but I like teaching. I like the aha that I see in people's faces. I like the light bulbs that go on over their head. Yeah. A lot of people ask me, how can you teach the same thing over and over for 39 years? Yeah. But it's always a little bit different. Each person is different. And I really like the contact with my students. Yeah. I'm a people person.
Okay. Is that what inspires you? What inspires Lori?
My students inspire me. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't teach young people. I teach people who pay for my wisdom. Yeah. Because I got tired of standing in front of a classroom where nobody really cared whether I was talking or not. Yeah. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy it when I see people make jokes in the language. And I always think, wow, that is so cool. You just made a joke in a foreign language.
Yeah, that is a huge step. I found that also with learning German. When I could start making jokes in German, I started thinking, okay, now I'm getting a hang of this. Yeah, and it's a good indicator of these the nuances or
exactly.
It's very something you can only do when you've got a certain level of mastery. So how long do you teach students? Are they kind of in your life and then out after a while, or
it depends on the course. Some courses are for short times, but most of my courses go on and on and on. Okay. I had one private school who said they've never had a course go on for so long.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that means you see students
I see them for years.
Decades even. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, you become friends. We talk about a lot of private things, and I talk about me, and they talk about them. It's very personal. I also become like the psychologist, marriage counselor.
I can imagine.
It's amazing what people tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people who are coming to Germany as an expat might be looking at teaching English as an option. It's basically, one of the only options that they've got if they don't have a good command of English. So what is a typical
German.
Of German, yeah. What does a typical day look like for you?
Oh God. Well, I'm self-employed now. So when my kids were younger, I worked part-time. I just worked in the evening at the Volkshochschule in adult education. But now I teach from morning until evening. I've got courses in Ansbach, which requires me driving an hour each way. And I have lots of courses in Nuremberg.
Okay.
And the days are full. I've given up the evening classes because I've discovered, having been here 39 years, I'm getting too old for get up at 6 o'clock and teach until 9 o'clock at night.
Oh yeah, that's a long day.
And it's hard to make a living teaching like this.
Yeah.
It really is, because you can't really get enough money to live from.
Yeah.
Because you just can't teach that much.
Yeah. And what advice would you have to people who might want to do what you've been doing, teach English as a foreign language here in Germany?
I think it's very interesting, and there are lots of possibilities. Private schools are always looking for native speakers to teach, where you don't necessarily have to be able to speak German. In Nuremberg, the Volkshochschule was where I got my big start doing that.
Right.
And it kind of ends up being word of mouth.
Right.
You get a reputation, and it just kind of snowballs from there if you're lucky.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier you have, how many, was it daughters?
I have 2 daughters.
Two daughters. Obviously,
Oh,
adults.
no, here comes the question.
Adults now. How did you raise them, English or German?
Yeah, I knew that's one of my embarrassing questions.
Embarrassing questions.
Well, I started, I have to say, I never had contact with many English-speaking people when I came here. I didn't search for contact with English-speaking people. And with my oldest daughter, I only spoke English to her. But my in-laws didn't understand English. And I found it a little impolite when I was in the room with them to speak English when they didn't understand. And I think sometimes they didn't realize I was disciplining her because they didn't understand what I was saying. But I stuck to it. And then the second daughter came, and I stayed with English. However, I always spoke German to my husband. And I asked my British colleagues, what do you do when the kids speak German to you? And they said, well, we just say, sorry, I don't understand you. I can't do that.
No.
I can say, I understand your dad, but I don't understand you when you speak German. My younger daughter didn't speak much of anything, German or English. And I started worrying, although I should have known better, I started worrying that she was having trouble with the 2 languages.
Right.
So when she finally said Tisch,
that's the language we're going with.
I said,
we're running with
Tisch, Stuhl, Wand. And I didn't do what I did with her sister and say, yes, that's a table. The problem was then, after a couple of years, my mother came to visit, and I discovered that my younger daughter didn't understand her.
Oh, okay.
The older daughter understood, but couldn't speak, and the younger daughter didn't understand at all. And I thought, now that's not on. So I started going back to the States every year. Now I have 2 grandchildren, because I have been here 39 years.
Enough time to get grandchildren.
Yes. And I started speaking only English to them. And it was really, really interesting, because my older grandson pointed to a bottle one time, and he said in German, Mama sagt Flasche. Grandma sagt, and I said bottle. You could see the little wheels going, and he said, Mama sagt Flasche, Grandma sagt, and I said bottle. What does Theo say? And he said Flasche. And I came to realize he thought I just had different words for stuff.
Grandma's own little
like lift
dialect.
an elevator. He did not realize until kids at kindergarten were learning English that I was actually speaking another language, which was really kind of cool, because he just, whatever I said, he accepted.
Yeah.
I have to go back to my younger daughter, though. She now speaks 4 langes fluently.
Wow.
So it had
no
nothing
cause
to
for
do.
concern.
No,
for concern.
no, not at all.
I have with my daughter, I'm noticing it now as well. She's 3 years old. She goes to kindergarten, and she is picking up not just German, but she's picking up
Franconian,
Frankish. And she's even formulating certain sentences as the Franconian people do. And I've been faced with a similar dilemma now, because what started happening is she comes up to me and asks me in German, or she starts addressing
Very
me in
typical.
German, which I have decided if she approaches a subject in German, I answer in German. That's the way I'm doing it, because I guess she's got to learn. We're going to be here for a long time. So I'm just saying, okay, if she starts in German, if she initiates it, then I speak German to her. What I'm not completely on board with is the Franconian stuff, because I can't correct her, because I don't always know when something is wrong, when it's coming. Yeah, so it's a bit of an interesting situation. But what has amazed me is how well she's done with both the languages.
Yeah.
So if she needs to, she'll say, speak pretty good English, and if she needs to switch over, she does it immediately.
But you speak English to your wife.
But I speak English to my wife. We speak English to each other.
Only English at home.
Yeah.
I think that's an easier atmosphere for the kids, because then you have your home language and your outside language. All of my colleagues said once their children got out of the house to kindergarten, they started using more German.
Right.
And
I
that's
think
when
it's natural.
that's what they speak for a good part of the day.
Yeah. In fact, most part of the day, if I was working it out, like how much exposure she has to English versus German. I mean, yes, on weekends, there's a lot more English, but during the week, it's mostly German that she's hearing. And,
I found with both my daughters and my grandsons, you get to a point where, because you don't have as much input in English, you get to a point where the conversations become too difficult. And I've started switching to German more with my grandsons, because they ask questions and we just don't have the vocabulary. And my daughters also said when they had English in school, native speakers' children don't all get ones in school. My younger daughter brought home a 5 one day. Okay, it's so like, how did you do that? Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the stereotype or the expectation.
It is. Everyone would expect. Well, I allowed my children to decide whether they told their teachers or not that I was a native speaker.
Okay.
And our kids usually don't do that well. My daughter said part of the problem was vocabulary, because your vocabulary at home is not the vocabulary you need in school or at work.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what do you talk about at home? Please set the table, knife, fork, spoon. And you don't talk about trade unions and air pollution with a 6-year-old,
Yeah. I do find it interesting for families that do have, like for you, it was at least you had a German,
half.
Like half German, half English. It is also interesting from a kid's point of view, but also from other perspectives when people come here speaking Spanish. Let's say they have Spanish and English at home plus German. Then you've got 3 languages that the kids are dealing with. I don't know how they do it. I don't know either. I do not understand how. I admire people who are able to then somehow work out a happy medium of how they do that. But like you were saying, it's much easier to be nuanced and much easier to express yourself in your native language. And that was the bit of advice we got for our children, is just speak the native language to them. And the German will happen on its own.
Well, that was the problem that I ran into, because when I got emotional and wanted to talk about emotional things, I wanted to use English. My husband and I always spoke German. And at the beginning, my German wasn't as good as it is now. Now I would say the 2 languages are 50-50. But what you can't as an expat, even if you speak the language, that doesn't mean you understand the culture. I had a Scottish friend who said, I had the feeling for the longest time my husband was ordering me around.
Right.
And I said, what? And she said, yeah, because he said, open the window.
Yeah. But.
Well, actually, that's not what he said. But when you're learning the language, you can't interpret. You're so concentrated on what they're saying. You don't listen to how they're saying it. Yeah. So they're not saying, oh, open the window. But you translate it, and there's a little particle that the Franconians put in that is a politeness thing. And a friendliness.
What is that mal?
The mal.
Mach
and
mal.
my husband would say, magst du bitte mal das Fenster auf? Now, he didn't say, mach das Fenster auf. He said, magst du bitte mal das Fenster auf?
Yeah.
And I translated that into open the window.
Yeah. Yeah. Which comes across very direct and very aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that at least Americans don't always say no. I often thought, what part of no did they not understand? And then I realized, I said, well, perhaps, maybe, I'm not sure if I can. I'm afraid it's not possible. And they go, yeah, but. It's like, well, I think I have yeah, but. It's like, and then you realize I never said N-O.
Yeah, South Africans have a very, very similar, I think from a cultural perspective, South Africans are very similar to Americans in that we are very polite.
Yeah.
And exactly like you say, I found out pretty early on in my time in Germany when I was formulating emails. If I was trying to tell someone to do something, I would write, "It would be good if we considered this," meaning we should consider this. But the Germans would read that, and if they didn't want to consider it, they would just disregard it. And I realized you actually have to be more direct than what we're used to being with Germans, so that they understand, hey, this is what we should do, this is what we need to do. And exactly like you were saying with saying no, sometimes we find very creative ways to say no without saying no.
Yeah, well, I told my daughter one time, she was younger, and I said, "Would you please set the table?" in German. And she said no. And I thought, wait a minute, that's not in the inventory of answers to that thing. Excuse me. Yeah. That was not a question. That was a polite request. Go set the table.
Do it. Yeah. That's not a request.
Yeah. But it's kind of like I try to tell my students, you translate the words, but you don't translate the culture.
Yeah.
Now, what you said was we're more polite. We aren't more polite. We just need more words to be polite. Okay, so don't be put off by when you come here by Germans, especially Franconia, that seemed they're very fond of saying themselves that they're too direct. But don't be put off by people being direct because that's part of their culture. That doesn't mean they're not polite. It just means we need a lot more words to get politeness out.
Yeah.
They think please is enough.
Yeah, we're done here. We don't have to formulate a flowery language.
Don't waste that. Yeah,
I've already said what I needed to say. Let's
exactly. They kind of find us to be kind of wishy-washy because we never get to the point.
Yeah, I think that's something that does happen. Living in Germany, though, is you become a little bit more direct.
Oh,
and
definitely.
I found when I go home home, I use home in
quotation marks.
My family and friends back in South Africa definitely notice that I'm way more what they think aggressive, but it's not. Yeah. It's just that I'm used to dealing with Germans on a daily basis.
My mom said that about my driving style. She said, "You drive really aggressively." It's like, no. It's like, get out of my way.
What has living in Germany done to your English? Have you found it as disintegrated or?
Yes.
Despite teaching it?
Despite teaching it, because I don't teach at a super high level. I was just telling my students this the other day. My German has gotten better and my English has gotten worse.
Right.
I notice when I go back to the States and I talk to my brother or to my best friend, it's like, oh yeah, I used to use those words. So I try to pull out my big words, but I think in German when I drive the car and I complain about stuff, I complain in German. I talk to myself in German. I'm really immersed in it.
Okay.
But it has, my English isn't as good. And sometimes I accept things in class that I shouldn't. I told my brother, I said, my German students are teaching me bad English. And he looked at me like only a younger brother could. And I said, well, for example, when my students say, I look forward to meet you, my brother, like you, my brother flinched.
Yeah.
I don't. Like, oh. And he said, what? Yeah. And I said, 99% of the people around me say, I look forward to meet you. You don't have to let it go, but you have to realize, oh, wait a minute, I have to correct that. And the word become, I don't even use anymore.
It's just too complicated.
Because I'm too unsure of it because I get my German and English mixed up.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I find exactly the same thing. And quite often I have also adopted some of the habits of my German colleagues because you just, like you say, you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
If there's certain ways that they formulate sentences, they like using the ing form. So I am saying that.
Well, the thing is, you understand your students. I mean, I can read their minds. I know what they want to say, and I know the mistakes they're going to make ahead of time.
Right.
And you have to be careful that you don't accept them. So I have to stop and tell myself or ask myself, would my brother understand them?
Okay.
And I'll tell them sometimes, I said, okay, I understood what you just said. I'm not sure my brother would.
Yeah. And that's a big deciding factor. I like that. I need to find someone where I ask myself, would X understand that?
Yeah. Well, but there have been studies done when you ask people who they speak English, non-native speakers, who they speak English to, 80% of the time they don't talk to native speakers. So they're speaking to other foreigners. As long as they understand each other, does it really have to be that accurate?
Well, that's the thing. You cannot go around. And you can't go around correcting them the whole day.
No.
It's just not a feasible
God,
option.
I'd get so tired with all the mistakes they make. No, I really have to say I really admire my students because after that, however many years they'd had, I couldn't speak German to save my life. We never spoke it. We translated it and we read it.
Yeah. So I guess you're not what they would call a grammar Nazi in English then either.
I am kind of like the grammar queen. I do grammar courses. I love teaching grammar. But you have to decide what the people really need.
Yeah.
If they just want to talk, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And there's a big discussion, and you have to ask your students what they want. Do they want accuracy or do they want fluency?
Yeah.
And that's why I ask myself, okay, that wasn't perfect, but would my brother understand them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for most people, that's enough.
It is enough. Interesting that you say that, because I found my German started improving in the beginning. It was very difficult to get to a certain point, but I only went to the next level of German when I just stopped trying to be accurate. And I just said, okay, I'm going to talk, and whatever articles I get wrong or whatever I say that's wrong, everyone's going to have to live with it. And suddenly there, my German actually started improving because I was speaking a lot more and saying a lot more things and just throwing it out there. And then I must say, I did like the Germans to correct me when I was learning.
I don't anymore. Don't correct me, please.
Really? No. I just want to say my stuff.
As far as I'm going to get. I tell my students, if you have to get good pronunciation, if your pronunciation is good, people will listen to you longer than if you have really good grammar, but fingernail on the blackboard pronunciation.
That's good advice too.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem is in school, we're penalized for every mistake we make. If you make a mistake on a test, you get a red mark. So people are afraid in speaking. They're afraid to make a mistake because in the past in school, you've always been penalized, and they have to realize you're not
this isn't school.
No, if I don't understand you, I say, excuse me, it's like, or I screw up my face, so I need Botox, But I tell my people, my German's not perfect. I use lots of de.
Right.
Yeah. Which is not der or de. Yeah, I said the Germans fill in the blank. Yeah. You just have to speak fast enough and be able to have something that people want to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of that is being able to formulate it as naturally as you can. And if that means making a lot of grammatical errors, then so be it. Yeah.
And I always tell my students, or anyone who speaks English as a native language, they are, when the Germans, I say, the native speakers of English are so glad that you are learning English so they don't have to learn German or French or Spanish. Yeah. We'll forgive a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what you have to realize. And Germans will too.
Yeah, they do.
They really are, and a lot of them speak English. But when you ask about learning German and such, there are also tandem groups that people do where for example, a German and an English speaker get together, and the German helps the English speaker with German, and the English speaker helps German. Those are ways.
Yeah, lots of different ways.
Lots of different ways, yeah.
Yeah. I found as well, reading news articles, and I saw Deutsche Welle now also has an option where they have German articles, and then they produce an audio version of the German article.
Cool.
So, and then they also sometimes translate that to an English version. So you have the written article, you can listen to the audio version, and you can read the English article if you want to fully understand. So that helps a lot.
There's so many more possibilities now. When I came here, like I said, 3 channels, no English, You
really had to seek it out.
And now, for my students learning English, or even native English speakers learning German, you can turn on How I Met Your Mother in German. And I tell them, it doesn't matter which direction you're going. Yeah. Watch it in your native language first, so you know what it's about. Yeah. You have to watch something that you're interested in.
Yes.
So if you want to learn German and you're not really interested in politics, don't pick out a politic article.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. What I also did was watch some of my favorite movies that I knew inside out in English. So like Dirty Dancing. And
definitely.
But those movies that I've seen a dozen times. Yeah, exactly. Put on the subtitles and watch it in German. As painful as it can be, though, to watch a movie that you hold so dear with these weird German voices and badly synchronized. You're like, oh my God. But it does help. If you know the movie inside out, it really, really helps with learning German.
I think the problem with a movie is a movie's long.
Yes.
That's why I suggest sitcoms.
Yeah. How I Met Your Mother is perfect.
Yeah.
Or Friends or whatever.
Well, as a native speaker, though, you can't underestimate how difficult it can be to understand.
Okay.
Because there are lots of, when you're talking about learning English, there are lots of inside things that we think are really easy English, really isn't. And it's probably the same thing with the Germans, if you're trying to learn German. But there's so many possibilities now on YouTube and, it's just fantastic.
And even apps that you can download on your phone, Duolingo, and there's dozens of apps that people can use.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you offer new expats?
I think one of the things that I would tell expats when they come over, especially if you're going to stay for a long time, my grandmother suggested this to me, and of course I didn't do it, kind of take notes about what you found different at the beginning. Yeah. Because I don't remember what I found strange.
Yeah. What's also interesting is how normal things become after a period of time. There's some things that I'll never get used to, but there are some things that do become normal. Is that the biggest advice that you can give to expats coming over here? Is that the number one piece of advice that Laurie would give?
I don't know. I don't think that would be the number one. I think people miss a lot when they don't try to get involved in the local culture.
Yeah.
And I don't mean wearing a dirndl and going to folk dance. But, even if it's doing a class at adult education, getting to know Germans, getting outside of the expat community.
Right.
Which is hard because you have to be able to speak the language.
Yeah. It is hard. I found as well that the language was everything. And when I first got to Germany, it's very easy to stick to the expat groups. Mm-hmm. So you join the English groups in every city, or you have a circle of friends that you stick to. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily English, obviously, whatever your native tongue is. And then it's very difficult. You get very comfortable in those circles. So you need to make sure that you get out of it. But the only way that you can, I find. What we found is we made some connections with some Germans in the beginning, but it was very few, and it was very difficult to make those connections until we could speak better German. So I guess the thing is patience and just keep actively at it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the wrong person to ask on that, because I came here being able to speak German, and I moved into a group of friends who are still my group.
So you just went straight into the culture.
I went straight into the culture. I could do it language-wise, and it was a fantastic group of people who accepted me for who I was. Don't underestimate the advantages, though, of being able, especially at the beginning, to speak to someone in your own language.
Okay.
I think you always need someone, because as good as my German was at the beginning, it wasn't my emotional language.
Yeah. It comes back to exactly that you express yourself far better in English or your native tongue. Than in German.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's not to, to tell people don't have any contact with expats, but I think it was always necessary for me to have one person where I could just talk without having to think of articles and grammar and all of that. Yeah. My parents lived in Australia for 3 years. They were in an American expat group.
Right. Yeah.
Because the Australians were hard to understand.
Well, that is kind of like another language.
It was totally another language, I stopped asking the bus drivers questions because they understood my English. Right. I never understood the answer.
Well, Laurie, this has been...
Well, Sean.
Well, that's my finishing off the interview voice. This has been an amazing chat. I think there's been a lot of interesting things about learning language, about teaching language, much more than I was thinking.
I told you I teach anyone, anything, anywhere.
Yeah. Very cool. Thanks so much for joining.
Certainly. I enjoyed it. It was fun.